On the morning of my son's wedding, I stood behind a column at the back of the church, holding the program like it was a handkerchief. The seat they saved for me was 3 rows from the front, beside a woman I didn't recognize. I had raised that boy, paid for the piano lessons he begged to quit, sat in every emergency room. But on his wedding day, I wasn't part of the family photo, not even asked. I'm Lillian Hayes, 69, and that was the moment I knew my place in their lives had quietly vanished. I wasn't angry, not at first, just stunned, as if I'd been erased in pencil, not ink. Softly, so no one would hear. Subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks. I wore slate blue that day. Something quiet. I remember smoothing my skirt as the bride's mother stood beside the photographer, hand looped through my son's arm like he'd always been hers. He laughed. A different kind of laugh than the one I knew from the kitchen table. This one polished, social, the kind that doesn't look back to see who's missing. The reception was at a vineyard upstate. I was seated with distant cousins and someone's retired orthodontist. The music was loud. I nibbled at grilled halibut while they danced, to the same James Taylor song his father and I used to play while painting the nursery 38 years ago. No one introduced me. No one clinked glasses and said to Lillian, who held us together after Tom passed. I was in the background, a name on the invite list. His wife's family were all over the microphone toasting, thanking, and praising. I clapped politely. My hands hurt after a while. At one point, I tried to find my son. I walked past the bar, past the clustered aunts and their sparkly dresses, and saw him backlit by lanterns, leaning in close to his new mother-in-law laughing about something. I wasn't part of that laugh again, so I turned around, drove home, before the sparklers came out. No one noticed I was gone, not even the next morning. I sat in my kitchen at 6 a.m., tea going cold. The house was still mine then. The sun came in across the oak floor. I remember watching the light fall on the photo of Tom and me from '82, the one we took in Maine, wind in our hair, him holding up that ridiculous fish. Tom died 4 years earlier, pancreatic cancer. He never got to see this wedding. Never got to see how gently and then completely they moved on without me. Before he died, he'd told me quietly, "Lily took care of you." I didn't know what he meant. Not fully. Until the lawyer called 2 weeks after the funeral. Tom had left me $5 million in trust, untouchable by anyone else. "It's yours," the lawyer said. "Only yours." I never told the children, not because I didn't trust them then, but because I wanted to keep something sacred. Something just between Tom and me. After years of raising kids, budgeting pennies, and watching every dollar, he gave me the one thing no one else had ever offered: peace. And yet, on the day our son got married, they didn't ask me to speak, didn't thank me, didn't save me a real seat. I didn't cry that night. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even bring it up. But inside, something closed like a door at the end of a hallway, soft but final. I remember the feel of a lunchbox handle in my hand, the plastic one with Spider-Man on the front that I carried to the car every morning, even when it wasn't mine to carry, even when it was too cold to speak. Those small mornings, they pile up in a woman's life, and no one remembers them but her dot. When my son was in 3rd grade, he forgot his science project at home. I drove 32 minutes through slush and wind with a Volcano model seat belted in beside me. He didn't say thank you that afternoon. He was embarrassed, I think. The other kids laughed at the foil and baking soda mess I had helped him build. But I was there. I always was. My daughter Marianne used to cry about everything: tangled hair, missing dolls, nightmares. I'd sit on the edge of her bed with a damp cloth, stroking her cheek, humming whatever came to mind. I think she believed I had magic in my voice. When her first boyfriend broke her heart, she collapsed in the hallway, all mascara and shaking. I didn't say a word, just wrapped my arms around her like she was 5 again. She wouldn't remember that moment now, but I do. Our house on Brook Lane wasn't much, but I made it feel like something. Cream paint, warm lights, casseroles with too much cheese, laughter layered on tiredness. Tom worked long hours, first in the tool shop, then in shipping. He was gone most weekends during the Christmas season. I'd tape the kids' wish lists to the fridge and circle the cheap ones. Somehow, Santa always made it work. I learned to cut corners in ways that didn't show. Water, the soap, used old drapes to make table runners, picked up groceries late at night when the clearance stickers came out. That's the thing people forget. Motherhood is invisible labor. You're never not doing something for someone, even in your sleep. One Christmas, I skipped buying new shoes so Marianne could have the pink boots she cried over at the mall. That same year, I sewed little stuffed animals for the children of our neighbor who lost her husband. No one knew that, either. The years pressed forward, PTA meetings, midnight fevers, forgotten field trip forms, and I kept going. I was the one who remembered their teachers' names, their childhood friends, their favorite snacks. I still remember how my son liked his sandwiches cut diagonal, never straight. I still slice them that way for myself sometimes, just out of muscle memory. When Tom got sick, everything changed again. There's a different kind of caregiving in sickness, one that humbles you. His voice got soft, his weight dropped. The kids came by, but not often enough. Marianne was busy with her job. My son had just moved in with his girlfriend, the one he later married. I sat at his bedside every night, rubbing lotion into his hands. The skin was paper thin by then. I whispered memories to him, like they were prayers. One night he opened his eyes and said, "You always kept the light on for us." I smiled, but something inside me folded under the weight of that truth. I always had. After he passed, they came for the funeral, said the right things, hugged me too tight. Then they left, like people do. The casseroles came for a while. Then the calls stopped, not abruptly, justless, until silence became routine. I still sent birthday cards, still knitted scarves, still asked about job interviews and promotions and second dates. I got short replies, emojis, sometimes nothing. I suppose they thought I was fine, that I didn't need anything, that I was just mom, a permanent fixture, like the wallpaper in the hallway there, but never looked at. What they never saw was the way the house sounded. After 6 p.m., the way I'd keep the TV on just for the noise, the way I'd reread Tom's old letters to hear someone say my name. I could have moved in with Marianne when she bought her condo. She suggested it once, half-heartedly, when she needed help with rent. I offered money instead. She took it, never brought up the idea again. When my son bought his first home, I sent a check for $5,000. No thank you call, just a text. Got it, thank you. That was it. No photo. No come see the place. I sent a second check for furniture. This time, not even a reply. I told myself he was busy, that he meant well. It's strange, isn't it? You give so much of yourself that one day you wake up and realize you're scattered across other people's lives, pieces of your time, your effort, your love tucked into their memories, even if they never acknowledge them, and you're left with silence, an echo of who you were. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it with the calm of someone who has sat still long enough to understand her own worth. Because somewhere between the lunchboxes and the funeral flowers, I became something steady, a keeper of the flame, and that flame didn't go out just because no one looked at it anymore. They don't know the way I used to sit up and wait for them to come home, or the way I learned to make meatloaf just like Tom's mother did because he missed her. Or how I once walked 3 miles in the rain because the car broke down and Marianne had a dance recital. I showed up, soaking wet, smiling, clapping like it was the Oscars. I suppose part of me believed that love like that earned a permanent seat at the table, a front row pew at the wedding, a toast, a moment, a mention. But love, I've learned, doesn't guarantee acknowledgement, especially when it's quiet, especially when it's a mother's love. So I stayed quiet too. I never told them about the inheritance, about what Tom had left just for me, not because I wanted to punish them, but because I knew, deep down, they had stopped seeing me a long time ago. What good is a lighthouse if no one's looking for the shore? Still, I kept the birthdays on my calendar. I kept the voicemail from my son saved, the one where he called me Ma in that boyish voice he used to have. I listened to it sometimes on Sundays, just to remember who I had been to them. That voice is gone now, grown up, polished, just like the smile I saw at his wedding, given to another woman, and still I keep their baby shoes in a box under my bed. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me still hopes they'll remember. Maybe because I haven't let go just yet, but I will, not out of anger, out of clarity, because the things I did for them were real, even if they've forgotten. And the silence I carry now, it's teaching me something, too. There's a certain kind of ache that doesn't announce itself. It settles instead. A slow, persistent heaviness in the chest, like the air thickens each time you walk into a room that used to be full of laughter. That's how it began, not with a single wound, but but with 100 quiet hurts. The first time I noticed it, really noticed it, was Thanksgiving after Tom passed. I'd roasted the turkey the way he liked her, butter under the skin, orange slices tucked in for sweetness. I laid the table with our old linens, the ones from our 25th anniversary trip to Savannah. I even made my daughter's favorite, cranberry relish, the one with the little bit of orange zest she always said reminded her of home. Marianne texted that morning to say she couldn't make it, something about a friend's ski trip and flights being cheaper on holidays. My son and his fiancée showed up 2 hours late, smelling of store-bought gravy and wine I hadn't He kissed my cheek absently, then asked if I could make it quick. Her parents were expecting them for dessert. I ate alone that night, just a plate of leftovers under the hum of the kitchen light. I remember the way the chair creaked when I leaned back, that old chair of Tom's, still there at the head of the table, as if it were waiting for someone more important. After that, the distance didn't come all at once. It came in missed calls and one-word texts. Birthdays I remembered 2 days later. In photos I found online of gatherings I hadn't been invited to. My son bought a boat with friends, took a trip to Mexico. I saw it all through someone else's tagged pictures. They stopped calling me mom in their messages. It became, hey, or are you okay? When they needed something, a check for a security deposit, advice on insurance. The only time Marianne called without needing anything was the day she got engaged. Even then, her excitement was too loud for me to keep up with. I congratulated her. She said they were thinking of a small ceremony, intimate, just close friends and family. I asked, gently, if that included me. She laughed. Of course, Mom, don't be so sensitive. That word sensitive, it stuck like a splinter, as if caring was a flaw, as if feeling forgotten meant I was too fragile, too emotional, too much. I began to notice how many conversations they had without me, decisions made, holidays planned, gifts exchanged. They stopped asking what I wanted for Christmas. Instead, I'd get something generic, a bathrobe one year, still in its plastic wrap, a candle with a scent that made my head hurt. I never said anything. That's the curse of being someone who once held their heads when they were sick. You know too well how to swallow your pain. You get good at nodding, by saying, it's okay, I understand. Even when you don't. One night I tried to bring it up to Marianne. I'd invited her over for dinner. I made all her favorites. She scrolled through her phone at the table, nodding every few minutes as if she were listening. When I asked if I'd done something to upset her, she looked up and said, "What? No, Mom. You always think something's wrong. You've got to stop that." She left early. I never brought it up again. After that, it became a habit to retreat. I stopped asking to visit, stopped offering to host. When I did call, I told myself I'd keep it short, light, pleasant. I asked about their jobs, their friends, their pets. They rarely asked about me. Once, my son ended a call by saying, "All right, gotta run. Thanks for checking in." Thanks for checking in. Like I was a telemarketer, not his mother. I began to shrink into the quiet. No one noticed. One winter, I slipped on the front steps and fractured my wrist. I drove myself to urgent care, waited in the plastic chairs with the late-night coughers and forgotten souls. They wrapped me in a brace and sent me home. I didn't tell the kids. I didn't want to be a burden. A month later, Marianne texted, "Everything good with you?" I stared at the phone for a while before replying, "Yes, all good." Because, what else could I say? Even the neighbors changed. The couple across the street used to bring over cookies. Now they kept to themselves. The mailman stopped making small talk. The world had gone on without me. And I had become a soft fixture in it. Someone whose voice didn't rise above the background noise. I started reading more. Journaling, watching birds from the window. Not out of peace, but out of necessity. You learn to sit still when no one invites you to move. Every so often, I'd get a card in the mail from Marianne, usually late, always with glitter. She'd write, "Hope you're doing well," with a little heart. I'd set them on the mantel. The sparkle clung to everything. That was the other thing. Everything they gave me felt like afterthoughts. Sparkly, impersonal things. Gifts that said, I remembered, but just barely. They didn't know about the money. Still don't. There's a strange power in that. In knowing you hold something so large, so life-changing. In choosing silence, I could have paid off their mortgages. Could have bought Marianne the house she cries about when the rent goes up. Could have given my son a down payment for that business he says he wants to start someday, but I didn't. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I realized something. quietly and painfully. I was giving to people who had already stopped seeing me. The money became a mirror, and what I saw wasn't gridded, was distance. A gulf I hadn't created, but one I had kept filling with love, hoping they'd cross it. They never did, so I kept my silence, just as they kept their absence. 100 quiet hurts. That's what it amounted to. Not one dramatic betrayal. No yelling matches. No slammed doors. Just years of being slowly uninvited from their lives. And still I sent cards. I liked knowing I did the right thing, even when they didn't notice, even when they didn't reply. I suppose, in some way, I thought love could win them back. But the thing about love is it needs somewhere to land. Otherwise, it just floats. And I was tired of floating. I needed something different. Not louder, just real. That's when I started to change. But I didn't announce it. I simply began to let go. The way leaves fall when the season turns, and no one notices the first leaf, but the tree does. It was a Tuesday when the envelope arrived, thin, pale beige, with my name printed neatly in the middle. Not handwritten, printed, like junk mail, or a form letter. The kind of thing that doesn't carry sentiment, just instruction. I almost didn't open it. It had been a quiet day. Was still in my robe, sipping tea by the window, watching the neighbor's dog chase its own tail. The sky was overcast in that moody way February tends to be in Illinois, but I brought the envelope in, set it on the kitchen counter beside my pill organizer and Hoffiton banana, and forgot about it for an hour or two. When I finally slid it open, the first thing I saw was a photocopy of a document, legal letterhead, a line at the top that read, "Authorization for property transfer." I stared at it for a long time before the words started to make sense. It was my house, my name, listed as the previous owner, my son's name, listed as the receiving party. I didn't understand, not at first. There was a form attached, something that looked half complete, a draft. The signature box for me was blank, but above it, someone had already typed in a date. It was a date that had passed 3 weeks earlier. I sat down slowly. The air in the kitchen changed, thickened. I must have read the packet 4 times. It wasn't a full deed. It wasn't even official yet, but it was enough to make something tighten in my chest. A string pulled too hard. Later that day, I called the attorney listed in the corner. He sounded rushed, like I was bothering him. I asked what the document meant, gently, with all the softness I had learned to use around people who forget you. He said, flatly, that he had been instructed to prepare documents for the anticipated transfer of property, that he assumed I had been informed, that your son indicated this was a family arrangement. I thanked him, hung up, stared at the yellowed wallpaper behind the phone as if it might offer an explanation. My son never mentioned it. Not in the last call. Not in the one before. There had been no conversation, no request, no warning. Just an envelope, assuming I'd go along. I sat in the living room that night without the lights on. Just me and the ticking clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the next room. They weren't trying to steal it, not in the traditional sense. But they had made a decision for me. One they believed I'd silently accept. One that said, clearly, you don't need this anymore. Maybe they thought I wouldn't notice. Maybe they thought I'd be grateful. Maybe they believed this house, this home, Tom's hands in the beams. My life in the wallpaper was just a transaction waiting to happen. It wasn't just the house. It was the assumption, the quiet erasure of my say. I tried to remember if I'd ever given them reason to think I wouldn't care. Had I been too accommodating, too quiet, too willing to let things go? I thought about all the nights I stayed up waiting for one of them to come home. All morning I packed their lunches while Tom was already at work. The roof I paid to patch, the windows I sealed, the birthdays I hosted in that kitchen, the tears wiped on that living room couch. And now, without a word, they had moved forward with taking it, not selling it, just transferring it, as if I were done, as if I had already left. That night, I walked through the house with my hand on the walls. I touched the doorway where we measured the kids' heights with a pencil. The floorboard that creaked no matter how many times Tom tried to fix it. The window I sat at every morning since his death. I looked at the envelope again. I opened a drawer and found an old photo of our son at age 5 standing on that same porch, grinning, holding a garden hose like it was a sword. Somewhere between that little boy and the man who now sent me legal documents, something had gone silent. Maybe it had always been this way. Maybe I had spent so many years giving, they forgot I had anything left to protect. The next morning, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and I did not cry. Instead, I began writing things down: dates, conversations, notes from the lawyers, a copy of the documents. Not for revenge, not for drama, but because, for the first time, I realized I needed to protect myself. I found the name of a different attorney, one not connected to them. I booked an appointment. When I sat in her office, a woman named Deborah, warm-eyed but brisk, I explained everything. She listened. She took the papers. She asked a few questions. Then she looked at me and said, "You're not required to sign anything you don't agree with. This is still your home." Something in me loosened, just slightly. I hadn't realized, until that moment, how much I'd been holding my breath. I asked her if I should confront them. She shook her head. "That's up to you. But I'd recommend protecting yourself first." So I did. I secured the deed. I created a will. I updated all my documents, quietly, cleanly, with precision. I didn't mention it to anyone. The next time my son called, he didn't bring it up, just asked if I'd seen the news about some storm out west. I listened, answered politely, said I was fine, that everything was normal, and it was, on the outside. But inside, a part of me had changed. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was a realization. That moment in the vineyard when I watched him smile with his new family. That had been the first erasure. This was the second. The line they crossed wasn't just about property. It was about agency. About seeing me not as a person, with history and heart and will, but as a placeholder, a temporary occupant. And yet, I remained calm, because I had learned something vital. The ones who assume you will always say yes are rarely prepared for your silence, and silence. I was starting to learn, had a power all its own. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't write angry letters. I simply began to move differently. They wouldn't see it at first, but they would. Eventually. I didn't slam the door. I didn't send a furious message. I didn't post anything cryptic on the internet. That's not how I was raised. That's not how I choose to live. Instead, I went silent. There's something steady in that. In letting the noise drain out of your world so you can hear your own breath again. After the documents, after the envelope, after the quiet indignity of being assumed away, I gave myself permission to stop explaining. I stopped calling. I didn't announce it, just slowly let the phone stay in the other room when it buzzed. When Marianne sent one of her casual "you good" texts, I read it and said nothing. I no longer needed to prove that I was still here, still dependable, still holding the thread. My silence wasn't spiteful. It was clear. I cleaned the kitchen in long, meditative motions. I stood at the sink in the late afternoons and let the water run until it was warm, then hot. I wiped the counter until it shone and stood back to admire the stillness. No crumbs, no fingerprints, no voices asking where something was. It felt like a kind of reverence, as if I was preparing an altar to myself. I went to the library more, sat in the quiet corner by the window, and reread old books I had once recommended to my children. Little Women, East of Eden. I turned each page slowly, like it contained a memory. Sometimes it did. I found an old notebook in the bottom drawer of Tom's desk. The pages were mostly blank. I decided to fill it, not with stories about them, but with notes about me, the things I liked, the meals I remembered, the memories that no one ever asked me about. One page I titled "Things No One Knows I Did." I listed them without embellishment. Drove for hours overnight when Marianne's car broke down in college, paid for my son's second year of university without telling Tom, took care of my sister's medical bills the year she lost her job, donated to a local shelter every December in Tom's name. I didn't write these to feel noble. I wrote them to remind myself that even if no one ever saw, I had lived with purpose. I met with Deborah again. We set up protections, financial boundaries, a healthcare proxy. All my legal documents were placed in a folder in my bedroom drawer, labeled clearly, not to be grimmed but to be prepared. I updated the beneficiaries. I made quiet choices. And still, I said nothing to the children. I could have told them, could have stirred the pot, could have cried or shouted or begged for them to see me again. But I had already tried that. In softer ways, in invitations unreturned, in casseroles sent home with no dish returned, birthday gifts opened weeks later. My silence wasn't absent. It was resistance. I began to walk every morning, before the sun was high, just down the block and back. Sometimes, farther, the air in early spring carries a scent I can't describe, something between thaw and promise. I breathed it in like medicine. The neighbors started to notice. The older couple next door waved more often. A woman 3 houses down, Evelyn, started joining me once a week. She was quiet like me, widowed, wore the same soft fleece every time. We didn't talk much, just walked. One morning she said, "You seem peaceful lately." I smiled. "I'm trying." It was true. I hadn't felt peaceful in a long time, not even in the busy years, when the house was full of socks and cereal boxes and slamming doors. There had always been tension in those years, a strain to hold it all up now. The silence was teaching me something, that I didn't need to be needed, to be valuable, that I didn't need noise to feel alive, that dignity sometimes wears the clothes of solitude. One afternoon, I went through the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. Dust on every box, sunlight through the slats. I opened the cartons one by one, baby clothes, old photo albums, Christmas decorations we hadn't used since Tom got sick. I found a letter from him, tucked into a folder with his handwriting on the front, "In case you ever need to remember." I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I tucked it into my nightstand. There's a time for remembering, and a time for preserving. A week later, my son called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was brisk. "Hey Ma, haven't heard from you in a bit. Just checking in. Call me back when you get a sec. IDID in single quotes T. Another message came a few days later. "Hey, is everything okay? Me and Natalie were thinking of coming by next weekend." I didn't respond. They didn't come. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't a game. It was simply a pause. A full-bodied pause. One I had earned. In the quiet, I found new rhythms. I baked bread for the first time in years. Not for anyone else. Just to fill the house with warmth. I played old records. Dusted off the turntable. Let Nina Simone and Carole King fill the air like incense. I sat in the backyard on a lawn chair, with a book and a glass of lemonade, and didn't look at the time once. I wrote letters I never sent. One to Marianne, about the way her hair looked when she was 6. One to my son, about the way he used to hold my hand in parking lots. One to myself, just to say, "You're still here." My silence became a shelter, not a wall, a place to come home to. I didn't know what they were saying about me. If anything, maybe they assumed I was moody. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they told themselves I was fine. But the difference was, I no longer needed their understanding. The noise of trying to be seen had always been louder than I realized. Now, in the stillness, I could finally hear my own thoughts, and they were kind. That was the part that surprised me. I wasn't filled with resentment. I was filled with truth, a calm truth that whispered, "You gave what you could, and now it's time to give to yourself." So I did. Not with grand gestures, but with slow, deliberate grace. I began to live like I belonged to myself again, and the world, for the first time in decades, felt like it might actually be mine. At first, the changes were so small, I didn't even recognize them for what they were. I rearranged the living room furniture, just a few inches here and there, moved the armchair by the window, turned the couch to face the garden instead of the television. It felt like breathing differently, like tilting the picture frame of my life back into alignment. I replaced the curtains, a pale yellow fabric with little blue sprigs, nothing fancy. But when the morning light came through, it reminded me of a French bakery I'd once passed in Boston with Tom. We never went in, just stood at the window and admired the pastries. I'd always wanted to go back, so I did, not to Boston, but to the idea of saying yes to myself. I started keeping a small envelope of cash in the drawer beside my bed. Nothing granted, just a few, hundreds at a time. Money meant to be spent on things that had no return on investment: a new pair of walking shoes, a silk scarf I didn't need, a small oil painting from a local artist with brushstrokes so wild and alive it made my throat tighten. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to want without justification. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need permission. One morning, in early May, I packed an overnight bag and drove west. No GPS, no plans. Just a thermos of tea and Tom's old flannel in the passenger seat. I ended up in a town called Millersburg, with nothing much but a diner, a river walk, and a second-hand bookstore that smelled like paper and rain. I stayed in a little inn run by a widow named Thea. She had white hair like mine, twisted into a bun with a pencil shoved through it. She didn't ask why I was there, just gave me a key and said breakfast was at 7. If I was up. I sat by the river that night and watched the water carry little bits of leaf and driftwood downstream. It felt honest, purposeful, like even the things we discard find a way to move forward. I came home lighter, not in body, but in breath. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do, to guilt, to last-minute requests that used to make me rearrange my whole day just to feel included. And I said yes. The things I used to tell myself were indulgent: an online poetry workshop, an afternoon nap, a garden plot at the community center. I planted zinnias and basil and tomatoes that came out strange but flavorful. The older man who ran the center told me, "You've got a good touch." I smiled, and didn't deflect the compliment for once. I stopped sending money. That was harder than I thought. My son texted about a leak in his roof, said he might need a little help. I stared at the message for a long time. Once upon a time, I would have sent a check the same day. Instead, I wrote back, "That sounds frustrating. Hope it gets resolved quickly." He didn't reply. I made a cup of tea and sat on the porch while it steeped, let the silence arrive without apology. It felt like strength. Marianne called to tell me she and her fiancé were buying a bigger place. She hinted about the down payment. I kept my voice kind but unmoved. Double quotes. "Oh, that's a big step," I said. "I hope it works out well." She paused. I could hear her trying to decide how far to press. In the end, she said, "Yeah, we'll figure it out." And I knew they would. That's the part I had missed all these years. They were always capable. I had just made it easy for them not to be. I had filled in every blank, every pause, every gap, but not anymore. I took a small portion of the inheritance and met with a financial planner, a woman in her 40s with sharp glasses and a blunt haircut. She didn't talk down to me. She spoke in clear terms and asked what I wanted my money to do. That I told her the truth. I want to live simply, safely, with room for beauty. We built a plan. I didn't tell the kids. I didn't need their approval, or their opinion, or their questions, masked as concern. I bought myself a new mattress, a proper one, supportive, with a soft top that made me feel like I was sleeping in a cloud. I hadn't done that in decades. My back stopped aching within the week. I went to the farmer's market every Saturday, picked out fruit like it was art, and brought home loaves of sourdough still warm from the oven. I ate slowly, lit a candle at dinner even when I was alone, especially then. I started journaling at night again, not out of loneliness, but out of reverence. The pages were filled with gratitude not for others, but for the moments I had given myself, waking up to silence, and not rushing to fill it. Finding a recipe for cardamom cookies and nailing it on the first try, reading a line in a novel that made me close the book and just sit with it. The life you save may be your own. I underlined it twice. One afternoon, Evelyn from down the block came by with a jar of plum jam. "Too many for just me," she said. I made us tea, and we sat on the porch watching the wind move the trees. She asked, "Do you ever think about moving?" I smiled. "I think about becoming harder to find." She laughed, but she understood. It wasn't that I wanted to disappear, just to live in a way that wasn't constantly open for inspection, expectation, or transaction. I moved differently after the silence. I wasn't looking over my shoulder for their approval. I wasn't waiting for the call, or the visit, or the acknowledgement. I let go of the idea that healing had to be loud or seen. I found joy in small rituals: washing the fruit in the morning, pulling weeds from the garden with my hands, changing the sheets. Every Sunday it was a kind of devotion to myself, to the quiet life I had never made time to want. And slowly, without announcement, I became someone else. Not new, just more fully myself. The version of me that had been waiting patiently behind the noise. I didn't forget what they did. I didn't forgive it all, either, but I learned to live beyond it. And that, I think, is what freedom really is. Not escape, but expansion. Expansion. A room finally big enough to stretch your arms without hitting the walls. A breath that goes all the way to your bones. It took a while for them to notice. At first, my silence seemed to slip beneath their lives without a ripple. I imagined they assumed I was busy, or tired, or just having one of my phases. That word again, something they used when they didn't want to listen too closely. But time has a way of revealing absence. It was Marianne who broke the quiet first. A text came through just after New Year's. Simple, short: "Missed you at Christmas." I stared at it for a long time before setting the phone down, because no one had asked if I was coming. No invite, no details, no time or place, just an afterthought, sent into the dark. I didn't reply. Weeks passed. Then came the second message. Longer this time. Did you get the card I sent? Been thinking of you. Things are kind of a mess lately. Call me. Still. I stayed quiet, not out of punishment, but because I had finally learned the weight of my presence, the fullness of what I used to offer, and I wasn't ready to give it away again. When you remove a light from a room, it takes time for people to realize they're sitting in shadow. It was late February when my son called. I let it ring. Then I let it ring again the next day. The voicemail messages started to sound different, less rehearsed, less breezy, more hollow. Hey Ma, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. Hope you're doing okay. 3 days later. Hi, I've been meaning to ask if you have those tax papers I left at the house. I can't find mine. Let me know. Then, a week of silence. Then, another call. This time his voice was lower, slower. I talked to Marianne. She said you haven't been answering her either. Look, if we said something, if we did something, I just hope you know we care about you. We really do. Care. It's strange how that word floats back in when people sense a shift in the tide, like a raft sent out in the fog, hoping someone might still be within reach. But I had already drifted to a different shore, and on that shore, I had begun to see clearly, not just what I had gained in their absence, but what they had lost in mine. The little things went first, the birthday cards that arrived with a check tucked inside, the recipe reminders, the phone calls on Sundays when they didn't realize they needed comfort, until my voice was in their ear. Then came the holidays. No one made stuffing the way I did. No one remembered that Marianne liked her mashed potatoes without garlic, or that my son preferred pies over cake. I had held those details for decades, quietly, the invisible archivist of their preferences, moods, stories. Without me, things became generic. I heard from Evelyn, whose daughter works with Marianne's fiancé, that Christmas dinner had been a bit of a mess. The turkey undercooked. No one brought cranberry sauce. They forgot to defrost the pie. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel vindicated, just confirmed that I had always been the undercurrent, the keeper of calm, the one who remembered, who arrived, who covered the gaps before they became cracks. And now, the cracks had begun to show. It wasn't about the money. They still didn't know. I hadn't touched most of it. It sat quietly in my accounts, building its own kind of stillness. But the real wealth I'd held, the emotional scaffolding I had built around their lives, was now absent, and they were beginning to wobble without it. I heard it in Marianne's voice when she finally left a message that wasn't cheerful. Her voice cracked. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry if I've been distant. Work has been insane. Ryan and I are well. It's been a lot. I just miss you. I pressed my fingers to the phone and whispered, I know, but I didn't call back, because I had learned the hard way that proximity does not always equal love. Sometimes, the people who need you the most are the ones who have forgotten how to value you. Letting them feel the emptiness wasn't revenge, it was a necessary correction. I stopped being their unpaid therapist, their emergency fund, their built holiday planner, their default babysitter for emotional labor. And in doing so, I saw them falter. I saw them fumble through the things I used to make look effortless. And then I saw them change, not overnight, not in dramatic gestures, but in the spaces where they used to assume I'd be. They began to reach out differently, not just when they needed something. Marianne sent a handwritten letter, not perfect, not long, but sincere. She told me about the loneliness of her new job, the miscarriage she hadn't told anyone about, the way she missed the smell of my kitchen. She said, I didn't realize how much of my steadiness came from you. I thought it was me, but it was you. I wept when I read that, quietly, in the middle of the afternoon, with the window open and a soft breeze against my arm. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer beside Tom's old letter. The apology wasn't everything, but it was something. My son took longer. Men often do, but eventually he showed up at my door, not with fanfare, not with flowers, just himself. He looked tired, humbled, like the boy who used to sit on my lap after a nightmare. I was wrong, he said, about the house, about a lot of things. I didn't say anything. He looked around the living room, the new layout, the new curtains, the silence that now lived here, like a welcomed guest. You've been doing okay without us, he said. I nodded. He laughed a little. I don't know if that makes me sad or proud. It should make you both, I said. We sat for a while. No heavy talk, no unpacking. Just a shared quiet. And that was enough. For now. What they lost without me wasn't loud. It was the soft thing they had never named. The hands that held it all together. The memory keeper. The comfort giver. The woman who showed up even when no one said thank you. But what I had found in their absence, it was a life of my own. And I was finally learning how to live it. It was a Tuesday morning in early autumn when I finally opened the drawer. The light had shifted. You know the way it does that time of year, golden, softer, almost forgiving. It poured across my kitchen floor like something sacred. I had just finished breakfast, 1 slice of rye toast, blackberry jam, half a cup of lukewarm coffee. Nothing special, but it felt whole. There was no sound except the ticking of the wall clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I stood, walked slowly to the bedroom, and opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was the letter. Tom's handwriting on the front. In case you ever need to remember, it had been there for months. I hadn't touched it. I wasn't ready. But something in me knew it was time. I carried it to the living room and sat in the armchair by the window. The one I had moved months ago, back when this house first began to feel like mine again. I held the envelope with both hands. My palms were dry. My throat is tight. And then I opened it. The paper was yellowed at the edges. The handwriting, his knit, patient, certain. I could almost hear his voice in the room. That low hum, that warm steadiness I had leaned into so many nights in the silence after the children were asleep. Lil, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm not there beside you. And that breaks my heart. But I hope this letter doesn't. I paused. I closed my eyes. First, I need to tell you something I think you've always known but maybe never believed. You were the center, the axis around which this family turned. Without you, we would have drifted. I know that. I saw it even if no one else said it. I breathed in deeply. He always knew how to speak to me without dressing it up. You gave them everything. You gave me everything. I'm not writing this because I doubt them. I'm writing this because I know what happens to women like you after the giving is done. I've watched it happen to others. Quiet women, strong backs, soft hearts. Once the meals stop, once the house quiets, people forget to look back. I felt tears slide down without force. They surprised me, those tears not from sadness, but recognition. Tom had always seen me. This money I left you, he wrote, isn't for them, it's for you. I wanted to make sure you had something that was yours alone, not to fix anything, not to buy their love, but to remind you that someone saw how hard you worked in silence, how deeply you carried us. I looked at the letter, the ink faded but steady. He had made that decision years before the end. He must have done it, knowing, even then, what might unfold. Or maybe just fearing it. Either way, he'd prepared for it. For the first time in your life, he continued, you don't owe anyone anything. You don't have to answer every call. You don't have to hold it together. You can just be. And if one day you feel forgotten, read this again. You were never invisible to me. I folded the letter slowly, hold it to my chest, and I wept, not loudly, just enough to feel him in the room. Later that afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper, the same notebook where I'd listed the things no one knew I had done. I turned to a fresh page. This time, I wrote to myself. Dear Lillian, I began, you have survived things no one ever applauded you for. Loneliness in a crowded room, the ache of being the only one who remembers everyone's favorite dessert, the silence after giving too much. I paused, then I kept writing. You were the one who stayed behind after the party to clean up, the one who remembered birthdays when no one else wrote them down, the one who called, who showed up, who brought the casserole, who lit the candles when no one else thought to. You've been kind, even when you were overlooked. You've been generous, even when no one said thank you. You have held the weight of others' needs so long, you forgot what your own voice sounded like. But now, you're starting to hear it again. I wrote the way I used to speak to Marianne when she was little, soft, clear, certain. You don't need to go back. You don't need to make it easier for them. You've given enough. You've earned your peace. And then, finally, you're allowed to be free now. I dated the page. I folded it gently. I placed it in the same drawer as Tom's letter, side by side. A conversation between two versions of love, his for me, and now mine for myself. That night, I lit a candle and sat in the garden. The air smelled like early fall, crisp, with just the smallest note of decay, not unpleasant, just truthful. The trees had started to turn. I watched a single leaf fall from the maple, spinning in slow circles until it landed on the lawn. It didn't fight, it let go when the wind said it was time. I watched it lie still in the grass, and I understood something. Letting go is not the same as giving up sometimes. Letting go is how you return to yourself. The letter changed me, not because of what it gave me but because of what it confirmed. That love doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes, it's written in quiet ink, folded in a drawer, waiting for you to be ready. And when you finally are, it says, I saw you. And now, finally, I see myself too. The house hums differently these days. It's not louder, or busier, or filled with visitors. The floors still creak in the same places. The same breeze still whistles through the kitchen window if I forget to latch it. The difference is in the way the silence feels. It's no longer empty, it's mine. I woke up early, not because I have to, just because I like the way the light falls across the windowsill around 6:30. It's pale and gentle, like the world hasn't quite decided to be loud yet. That time of day is a gift. I boil water for tea, always loose leaves now. I stopped buying the bagged stuff a few months ago. Something about scooping the leaves and steeping them slowly makes the morning feel more deliberate. Sometimes, I write in my notebook while I sip. Other times, I just sit and listen to the world waking up around me. The neighbor's dog barked at squirrels, the distant hum of traffic, a mourning dove cooing from the pine out back. I still walk most mornings. My path hasn't changed much down, past the school, around the park, and back along the pond. But the pace is different now. I don't rush. I stop when I want to. I notice things I used to miss. The way the ivy grows through the old fence. A patch of wildflowers no one planted. The flicker of a rabbit's tail disappearing into brush. People wave. I wave back. Sometimes, Evelyn joins me. Other times, we pass each other, share a smile, and keep going. There's no need to fill the silence between us. Some friendships are, like that, built not from chatter, but from shared pace. I've learned to cook for one without sadness, not the same old meals I used to make out of obligation. I am trying new things now. Roasted fennel, lemon risotto. I made spanakopita last week just to see if I could. It didn't look like the photo, but it tasted good. That was enough. I eat outside when the weather allows. On the porch, with a cloth napkin and real silverware. Not for anyone else, just for the ritual of honoring the moment. There's honesty in tending to yourself, not out of vanity, but out of regard. I started volunteering twice a week at the little historical library in town. Cataloging mostly, sometimes greeting guests. Teenagers come in for school projects. Tourists wander through in the summer. I like being around books again. The quiet order of them. The way they hold whole lives inside without asking for attention. No one there knows much about me. Just my first name. They call me Miss Lillian, which makes me smile. They think I'm kind, reliable. That's all they need to know. And that's all I feel like offering. Marianne wrote again last month. A longer letter this time. She told me about a new job. About a therapy group she's trying. She thanked me. Not for anything specific. Just for being who you were all those years. Even when I didn't understand what it cost. I reread that line more times than I'll admit. I wrote her back, briefly, kindly. I didn't rehash old wounds. I didn't open the door too wide, just enough to let in a little light. My son called on my birthday. He didn't ask for anything. Just told me he missed me, that his kids were getting big, that Natalie had started asking about me. I smiled at that. I asked him to send a photo. He did. I printed it and placed it on the fridge, not because I'm waiting for them to return, but because I'm allowed to hold joy and distance at the same time. That's something I didn't understand until recently. Peace isn't the absence of grief. It's the willingness to stop feeding it. Some days, I still feel the tug, the ache of what I gave, the shape of what went unseen, but it no longer defines me. I don't need them to rewrite the story. I've written a new one. The money Tom left sits quietly in a separate account. I touch very little of it. I use what I need. The rest is there, waiting for a time when I might want something more than silence and soft mornings. But for now, I don't. I don't dream of bigger houses or tropical vacations. I don't want a luxury car or a cruise or an inheritance plan that turns heads. I want slow Sundays. I want soft chairs and clean sheets. I want soup simmering on the stove, and the porch light on by dusk, just because I like how it glows. I want a quiet that is earned, not forced. I want my name to feel like mine again. And it does. Sometimes people ask if I get lonely. I smile, because I do. Sometimes, of course I do, but loneliness is different now. It visits like weather passing through, then gone. I no longer fear it. I've learned how to sit with it, make it tea, let it speak, then gently show it to the door. That's what this new life has given me. No noise, not applause, but I know, a deep, slow knowing, that I am enough, not because they've returned, not because they apologized, or changed, or realized the depth of my giving, but because I have. I see myself clearly now. I see the way I loved, the way I endured, the way I carried things no one asked me to carry, and the grace with which I set them down. That grace didn't vanish, it stayed, even when they did single quotes, and now it keeps me company. My life is quiet now, and that's enough. I wasn't angry, I was finally empty, and that was beautiful.